In our third video on our series in psychological gesture, we'll talk about adding resistance and drive to the PG, as well as the importance of radiating, right after this. Hi, the Inspired Actor here. If you're new to this channel, we are dedicated to helping actors become better artists by offering these quick, roughly 10-minute acting lessons. We have about 100 of these on our channel so far, so feel free to check them out. And if you want to see more videos like these in the future, go ahead and subscribe so you'll be notified as soon as they come out. Also, take a moment before you forget and hit that like button, as it really helps me out. And if you know people who might like these videos, please don't hesitate to share them on your social media outlet of choice. The slighter the change in your gesture, the finer the sensitivity that will develop in you. Michael Chekhov. Hi, once again, this is part 3 of my series on psychological gesture, the crown jewel of the Michael Chekhov technique. If you missed the earlier parts and want to catch up real quick, I'll put a link to them in the notes. To review, in part 1, we discussed that a PG is the spine of the character or scene in a condensed physical form. With practice, we can quickly and easily hone in on a useful psychological gesture, saving ourselves loads of time in our process and freeing us up to use that gesture to get at the truthful details of our scene and character in a deeper and more dynamic way. In part 2, we discussed adding quality, tempo, and rhythm to your gesture to affect the feelings you obtain from the action as well as its intensity. In short, one of the ways a psychological gesture's composition can be stated is with this equation: PG equals kind plus quality plus strength. The kind of the gesture, or the actual physical action of the gesture, push, pull, rip, or gather, for example, awakens in the actor its corresponding desire. The quality of the gesture is the feeling with which the gesture is colored and awakens a corresponding emotion. And the strength of the gesture is its amplitude and determines the PG's power or intensity. Last time, I was able to introduce tempo and rhythm as components of a gesture's strength, but I ran out of time before I could go over the final components of strength, which are the drive and the resisting force of the gesture, what Chekhov describes as its heaviness or lightness. Imagine that you have in front of you a large object, maybe a boulder of some kind. First, I invite you to imagine yourself physically lifting it. Go on, get up and try it out. Now, you may have imagined that the boulder was very heavy and that you just barely managed to get it off the ground. If you did that, I'd like you to imagine that the boulder was made completely of styrofoam and very easy to lift. That heaviness or lightness of the object of the action is what we're talking about here. The action of lifting remains the same, but how heavy or light the boulder is determines how much strength you will need to execute the gesture. The reason I call it resisting force is because not all objectives are subject to the whims of gravity, which is what heaviness or lightness implies. The strength of a pull, for example, is determined by how much the object of that pull resists the action. A rip-tear may be easy or difficult, depending on how thick or resistant the object is to being torn. Get the idea? Drive is another component of strength. But rather than being externally resistant, in other words, its heaviness or lightness being determined by the external object of the action, its strength comes from within ourselves or our character's selves. Let's go back to that boulder. Let's imagine that it's not too heavy or too light. It's sort of medium heavy, something that we can lift, but it takes effort. Now let's imagine that we have been hired to lift that boulder, but our heart's not really in it. Maybe it's past 5 and we really shouldn't be doing any work, but our boss is making us. Now go and lift that boulder. It's not as easy as it should have been, is it? Now, let's try it again. But this time imagine that you must move that boulder because it's blocking the road and you have to get to the hospital because your mom has been in an accident. Now, that usually takes no time at all to do. You see, how much drive you or your character has to fulfill the objective is also a big determinant of how heavy or light completing the object is perceived to be. You may have heard this called the stakes of the scene as well. It's just another word for what we're talking about here, but in this case it is applied specifically to psychological gesture. So really, how much my character wants to execute the psychological gesture is a strong determinant of the character or scene's strength. So, to sum up, strength equals tempo plus rhythm plus resisting force plus drive. Now that we have covered all the components required to create a psychological gesture, I wanted to review when the PG actually begins and ends. Once you have found a PG that is satisfying for you as an artist and works in the context of the script you are doing, and once you have had the opportunity to get comfortable with the internal and external action of the gesture itself, then it's time to really focus on the artistic frame of the gesture. I've done a video on the artistic frame in the past, and I'll be sure to link to it in the notes. Framing is important because it ensures that our gesture is reinforced as conscious action, which elevates it from being merely functional to a means of artistic expression. Employing the artistic frame enhances the power of the PG, increasing our chances of employing it successfully. Just like a good picture frame, there are 4 sides of an artistic frame. The first side is the preparation. In this case, we prepare by visualizing in as much specific creative detail as possible, ourselves executing the action from beginning to end. By visualizing ourselves carrying out the psychological gesture successfully, we increase the imaginative power of the gesture and assist in locking its physical form into its psychology. Remember, strong preparation makes the action effortless. So the better you learn to visualize yourself performing the action, the greater ease the action will have. Which brings me to the second side of the artistic frame, the action of the gesture. The action of the gesture is when the intangible psychology meets the tangible physicality of the gesture. The third side of the artistic frame is the sustain of the gesture. This is where we open ourselves up to fully radiate the gesture and simultaneously receive its power. Again, the whole conceit of the Michael-Chekhov technique is that there is no separation between psychology and physicality, and that by performing an outer action, we can affect our inner actions of feeling, thoughts, and will force, which in turn moves our outer action to reflect those changes, which in turn causes new inner action, and so on, creating a kind of spinning, imaginary wheel of creativity and inspiration in our acting. Radiation is where all the stuff you are looking to happen in your acting actually occurs. So if you're working with text, for example, try not to say it on the action. Say your line on the radiation. Let me give you an example of what I mean.
I don't want to.
The final side of the artistic frame is the termination of the gesture. Remember, a frame cannot perform its function without a boundary. We need to have a feeling of form in our work, and the form of the gesture is never complete until it has an endpoint. Otherwise, your intentions and your actions will bleed into each other, creating muddy, unclear acting choices. Remember, actors work in the medium of specifics. The clearer we are with our acting, the better we are able to share our character's inner life with our audience, which is the primary goals of our work. So, to review, first, I prepare for the gesture by visualizing myself executing the gesture from beginning to end. Then, I perform the gesture physically while incorporating its quality and strength. Then, I receive the gesture's offering. And while simultaneously radiating the power of the gesture, I say my line or several lines or perform an entire scene or play or character, however you are using the gesture. Finally, I end the gesture, taking in its form, and start the process again. Think of this process as pressing on the gas pedal of your imagination. How much you press the gas depends entirely on how far you are going and how much you may need it. Sometimes you will perform a roll where it almost feels like you are going downhill. 1 PG is all you need. Sometimes a roll can be far more difficult and will require you to do your PG several times, or might need several different PGs in order to get from point A to point Z. Every roll is different. Execute the gesture as many times as you need during rehearsals or offset to really ingrain the gesture into your full body and psychology. But remember, this is not something an audience sees. This is a tool. It's no more part of the final work itself as a paintbrush is part of a painting. This is how we get there, not our destination. Next time, we'll talk more about the components of psychological gesture and talk about some alternative ways you can find a good one. So if you want to be the first to be notified when that video comes out, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. See you later, colleagues.